When we think about head protection for the modern U.S. tanker, the CVC helmet jumps right into mind. It has been around since the early 1970s and has seen many upgrades. It replaced the T56-6, which at that point had only been in service for less than 15 years. Neither of these are the focus of this video. Instead, I want to take a look at the Sierra Armored Vehicle Crewman helmet, a helmet that never stood a chance against the CVC. So what was the Sierra AVC, and why did it fail? Hello and welcome. I'm Jake, and today I'd like to discuss these two helmets sitting right next to me. The Sierra AVC was one of those helmets that it existed for a purpose, was tested, wasn't adopted, and then was just lost to history. They pop up from time to time on eBay. There's a few reports written on them. They're referenced in a book. But that's about it. And there's not a lot of information on them. So I figured, might as well do a dedicated video on it. And here we are. But before we get into the AVC itself, let's first talk about the history leading up to it with the development of crewman helmets and where it all came from. So let's just get right into it. Shortly before the U.S. entered World War II, the M1938 tank helmet was introduced. This helmet was only able to protect from light bumps and offered no ballistic protection. It would go on to serve well into the next decade, but by the mid-1950s, the tank helmet would start to dwindle in stock. This forced tankers to use European clones of the M1938 as well as football helmets. These helmets were often like this McGregor-made example, which had communication gear added to it. The Army would continue to look more into football helmets until the early 1970s. Though a decent stopgap, it became very obvious that a new helmet needed to be developed, and rather quickly. The Quartermaster Research and Development Center, we know today as Natick Labs, would take on that task. By 1957, the T56-6 would be the results of those efforts. Due to delays with the helmet, it did not enter service until 1961, after which it was designated as the Combat Vehicle Crewman helmet. The T56 would see extensive use during the Vietnam War and would be around until the early 1980s. As the 60s started to come to an end, Natick Labs started to look into replacing the T56. They wanted to figure out a better way to protect both the head and hearing of armored crewmen. A new set of requirements was put out, and Gentex would offer up a helmet that they already had in the works. This helmet featured a new liner, but a shell based on the BPH-2, which was a helmet already in use by the U.S. Navy. In 1972, that helmet would be adopted as the DH-132. Okay, so now that we're done with the history leading up, now we can focus on the AVC itself. And unfortunately, there's not a lot written on this helmet. The only real information on the AVC comes from the two reports on the two different tests ran on the helmet, and a reference in the book Steel Pots Volume 2, which is a fantastic book. It is a little bit pricey because it's out of print, but it is what it is. And there's only about 2 paragraphs on the AVC in that. So there's really not much out there. All I can say is that the original prototype was made out of a plastic instead of fiberglass, probably to just, get the shape right. And then eventually they moved to what is this helmet. This would have been used, from what I can tell, in the bump test. And then this is kind of like your final design, nice painted version. And honestly, other than that, that's all there's really known. I don't even really have a good date on when the project started. All I know is that it started at some point in the late 60s, and that's about it. So let's go look at the tests that were performed on the AVC and see how it did. First thing to be tested was to see how the AVC did against light bumps. And this test happened during May of 1973 and was conducted by the U.S. Army Aeromedical Research Laboratory, Fort Rucker, Alabama. If the helmet could protect the wearer against low-level impacts, but not full-on impact trauma. In the report, this was summarized in the first goal as follows. The protective headgear must provide bump protection and prevent mission impairment through injury due to head impact with the interior part of the armored vehicle. It was deemed that dropping the helmet from 18 inches was similar enough to possible bumps that would occur in an armored vehicle. After the drop tests were performed, each of the original 12 helmets were x-rayed to see if any damage occurred. As shown on the report, you can see noted problems with the seam and uneven glue application. This, along with light glass showing up in 3 of the helmets, means that more than half of the helmets experienced some sort of failure. Only 4 of the 12 showed no defects at all after the drop test. After all is said and done, the report states, the PN 791 failed to meet the technical performance criteria. So it failed the first test. How would it stand up in the sound protection test? The sound protection test would also be conducted at Fort Rucker, and this was during June of 1973. The procedures were done to the same standard that was used on both the DH-132 and the T-56. 10 helmets were tested 3 times each, with frequencies ranging from 75 Hz all the way up to 8,000 Hz. This chart shows that the AVC did not do well compared to the standard. The conclusion of the report states, the Sierra helmet significantly failed the attenuation specifications and therefore did not meet the attenuation requirements established by the Surgeon General. It goes further by saying, the Sierra helmet in its present configuration is not acceptable as a hearing protector for the U.S. Army tank personnel. So unfortunately for Sierra, the AVC just didn't do what it needed to do. I mean, it's a helmet that doesn't protect against bumps. It's a helmet that's going to be used in places with loud noises, and it doesn't protect against loud noises. So, I mean, it just didn't do what it needed to do to be even considered for an alternative role that the Army thought maybe it could fit it in, which I'm not really sure what that role was, but we'll digress. With that being said, though, I still want to get both of these helmets out on the table, do a nice overshot, and let's do a little detailed overview of the helmet. So let's just get right into it. So now that I have the 2 helmets on the table, let's put the painted one off to the side to focus first on this test helmet. Okay, so the shell of the helmet is made up of a epoxy fiberglass, and this is the same helmet from the photos I used earlier to demonstrate its use in the bump protection test. And I'll give it a quick spin to give you all a good look at all the markings, and just an overall view of the shape, considering it's unique in its own way. It's not really it's kind of a weird looking helmet. Taking a look at the nameplate on the back, you can see AVC helmet, size large, and Sierra Engineering Company. And then we jump around to the front, and this helmet is labeled as helmet number 1. So I'm not sure if that's in reference to the test or not. Let's take a look at the adjustments for the ear cups. These are fairly stuck in place at this point. The cups do rotate, but they are also supposed to be able to move up and down, and then right and left, and then you're supposed to be able to tighten them in. This one at least doesn't move. Jumping over to the right side, this cup can rotate but has no directional movement. The knob freely spins, but doesn't do anything at this point. It should either tighten down or loosen up to allow for a better fit. Both ear cups have non-gel cushions with foam on the inside, which at this point is almost gone. Over on the inner portion of the left ear cup, you will find the microphone arm, which is tightened down at the base, allowing for it to swing up or down. This arm is merely just an angled metal tube that comes to an end, with the microphone attached to a ball joint. Taking a closer look here at the microphone, you'll notice that it's fairly close in design to the T56's microphone, but has a unique feature. This mic has an on and off switch directly attached to it. And as you can see, you can switch it to on and you can switch it back to off. I don't know, just kind of a unique little thing. Above the mic is the push-to-talk toggle switch. Pushing down opens the mic momentarily until pressure is released, and toggling up leaves the mic on until toggled back to the middle off position. Something that I initially overlooked and I needed to go back and fix is that the toggle down position is usually for outside radio communications, with the up position being for intercom or intercommunications within your vehicle. I can't say for certain that this is true for this helmet, but I can make a safe bet based on the T56 and DH-132 both sharing this feature, but let's get back into it. Flipping over to the right ear cup, you have the microphone plug. This can be removed, allowing for the M25 protective mask to be plugged in. This is a standard feature that is also on both the T56 and DH-132 and allows for use of the mask's internal mic, improving communication in a seabird environment. Unsnapping the chin strap and moving the microphone to the side, we can get a better look at the suspension and liner. Compared alongside a T56, you can see how similar they are to each other. 2 straps run diagonally across, a single strap in the middle, and all 3 are adjusted in the rear. The only real difference is this leather pad in the center, which honestly has seen better days. In the front, you have the brow pad, which has 1 loop through adjustment, and then as you can see, the excess was just wrapped around to get it out of the way. Moving to the rear, you have the nape strap, which is also adjusted from one side and allows for just a little bit more fine tuning on the fit of the helmet. Underneath the suspension, you have a rubber foam impact liner, which is similar to the T56 and other helmets such as the SPH-4 or APH-5. The output cable is the same as the previous T56, allowing it to use the same bailout cable as that helmet. However, this is not the same on the painted AVC, as it uses the standard U229 connection instead. The last thing to talk about is the chin strap. It's fairly well made and surprisingly comfortable. It has a single snap on the left side, which snaps in good and secure, but does not allow for adjustment. Over on the right side, you can adjust the strap with a simple pull-through cinch. The foam pad in the middle, however, will need to be centered using the hook and loop on the underside. I am fairly impressed by the pad, which is pretty thick for being a pad attached to a helmet strap. Not sure if this would be a good thing long term, but seems nice in theory. Alright, so that's the unpainted test helmet. Let's quickly go over the more complete looking painted helmet and get that on the table. Okay, so this is the olive drab painted AVC, and I personally really like the look of this one. This looks more like what a production helmet would have looked like. On the rear, it has the nameplate like before, but this time around it has a pin number of 791-26 on it, as well as all the other information. On top of that, the knobs actually have text on them indicating which way does what. And also on this helmet, the left side ear cup does have a limited degree of movement, though it doesn't really lock into place, but is more confined to that general area. The microphone on this helmet is changed back to the same as the T56, which meant that it would be without its unique feature. And as you can see, the on and off switch was completely eliminated from this version of the helmet. Above the microphone, you can see that they changed the toggle switch, and I think this is a much better design than the previous one. No changes were made to the suspension or liner, with only the ear cups changing to a black color from the weird teal color. Alright, so that wraps up getting a closer look at these two examples I have here, and let's just jump back and do some final thoughts, and we'll get this closed out. Alright, so that was the AVC up close. Was it a good helmet? I'm going to have to say no, based on how it did in its tests, and just the fact that if put up against the CVC, the DH-132, it's no contest. I'm going to take the DH-132. It's just a much better helmet. It performs all the tasks that you need it to perform, and then you have the fact that it's just more versatile, the fact that you can take the shell off and all that. That being said, though, if the DH-132 was never developed, you're in an alternate universe, and your option is continue to use the T56 or develop further the AVC, I can see if you can fix some of the issues, the AVC being a decent helmet. So it's interesting to think about, would an alternate universe version of the AVC eventually see it be upgraded with Kevlar or something along those lines like the DH-132 was in our timeline? But I'll leave the alternate history up to someone else. Either way, if you like this video, consider subscribing, hitting that like button, or dropping a comment down below. You can also consider checking out this video or the podcast, which I'm totally not behind on, and am totally trying to figure out. Let's just ignore that I'm behind. And until next time, thanks for watching.